Terrence Morris had always been the kind of employee who stayed a few extra minutes to make sure everything was in order, shelves fronted, floors swept, register drawers counted. That night, like so many before it, he clocked out of the CVS just before 10:45 p.m. The store was quiet, save for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the faint whir of refrigeration units humming in the background. Outside, the parking lot was mostly empty, bathed in the pale glow of streetlights. A slight breeze stirred the wrappers and receipts that littered the asphalt, the remnants of a long day. Terrence stepped outside into the humid night, his red CVS polo clinging slightly to his back, his name badge still clipped to his shirt, Terrence M., Customer Service Lead. He exhaled deeply, feeling that familiar mix of exhaustion and relief, and pulled out his phone. His Lyft was 7 minutes away. Not bad. He made his way to the wooden bench at the edge of the store's walkway, the one near the faded handicapped parking sign. It had become his unofficial waiting spot after countless shifts. Terrence sat down, careful to avoid a chipped slat, and leaned back, stretching out his legs. He plugged in his earbuds, let a chill lo-fi playlist shuffle on Spotify, and watched as a moth circled the nearby lamppost. The night had a rhythm, slow and predictable, just the way he liked it after 10 hours on his feet. He scrolled absent-mindedly through messages and memes, replying to a text from his sister about their mom's birthday dinner. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked, then faded into silence again. It was a simple scene, even a peaceful one, just a young man waiting for his ride home after a long shift. But beneath that calm was a fragile trust. Terrence knew the unspoken rules. Keep your hands visible, don't linger where you're not supposed to. Always be polite, never raise your voice, and above all, avoid attention. Still, on that night, he felt safe enough. After all, he was doing everything right. He had just finished working an honest job, still wore his uniform, and was seated directly under the store's surveillance cameras. He wasn't loitering. He wasn't making noise. He wasn't bothering anyone. Just waiting. Just existing. That's what made what happened next so devastating. There were no signs, no warning, no chance to prepare. One moment, Terrence was nodding to the beat in his earbuds, tapping his foot, checking the app for his Lyft's arrival time. The next, the atmosphere shifted. The soft rumble of an approaching engine. Lights not white but flashing red and blue. The calm of the evening fractured like glass under pressure. Terrence paused the music and looked up, confusion flickering across his face. 2 police cruisers rolled into the parking lot, slow and deliberate, like predators circling prey. A knot formed in his stomach. He sat up straighter, instinctively removing his earbuds. His Lyft was now 4 minutes away. But something told him this night would be longer, and much more dangerous than he ever imagined. The patrol cars came to a halt, engines still humming as doors creaked open and 2 officers stepped out. Terrence Morris felt his pulse quicken, the kind of anxiety that didn't come from guilt but from memory, news stories, hashtags, names turned into protests. He instinctively sat straighter on the bench, his hands resting visibly on his knees, palms up like a silent plea. The officers didn't smile or nod or ask if he was okay. They walked toward him with practiced suspicion, scanning him as though he were an unfinished puzzle that didn't quite fit the picture they had in mind. "What are you doing here?" one of them asked, his voice flat, authoritative. Terrence looked up and met the officer's gaze, trying to keep his voice calm. "I just got off work. I'm waiting for my Lyft," he said, gesturing to his CVS shirt and name badge, hoping they would notice the obvious. "You got ID?" the second officer cut in. Terrence reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, pulling out his wallet. He held up his driver's license like a trophy of innocence, like a shield toothed in to block suspicion. They barely looked at it. One of them asked if he'd been drinking. Another asked if he had any weapons. Terrence blinked in disbelief. "No, sir. Just finished my shift. My ride's almost here." His phone screen was still lit, the app showing a tiny car icon approaching on the map. None of it mattered. One officer motioned for him to stand up. "You match a description," he said vaguely. "We got a call." That sentence hit Terrence like a slap, hollow, unspecific, but dangerous. "A call," he echoed. "From who?" "Don't worry about that," the first cop replied, stepping closer. "Stand up." The tone wasn't a request. Terrence rose slowly, his legs stiff, every nerve alert. "Can I call my manager?" he asked. "There are cameras here, turn around. Hands behind your back." The cuffs clicked cold and unforgiving around his wrists. Terrence's mind raced. He hadn't done anything. He was still in his work clothes. His shift had just ended. Why wasn't that enough? He looked around, hoping someone might see, might intervene. A car turned into the lot. His Lyft. The driver's eyes widened as he pulled up to the curb and saw the flashing lights, Terrence in handcuffs. "He's my rider," the driver called out through the window. "He just messaged me." The officers hesitated for a brief second. But the cuffs stayed on. One of them patted Terrence down while the other questioned the driver. Terrence stood motionless, heart pounding, humiliation washing over him in waves. It wasn't just the cold metal on his wrists, it was the knowledge that nothing about who he was could protect him from what they assumed him to be. He wasn't a person in their eyes. He was a description, a suspicion, a threat, and no badge, no uniform, no job title could change that. Terrence stood on the edge of the curb, wrists locked behind him, the pressure of the metal digging into his skin more with every breath. The officers hadn't loosened the cuffs despite the Lyft driver's clear statement. "He's my rider," the man had said again, a trace of disbelief in his voice. But the police barely responded. One officer kept his hand near his holster while the other rifled through Terrence's backpack, pulling out a phone charger, a spiral notebook, a nearly finished sandwich wrapped in foil. The contents spilled onto the trunk of the cruiser like evidence of a life too ordinary to be suspicious, and yet, here he was. His dignity unraveling in full public view. A third patrol car had arrived now, lights still flashing, casting warped shadows across the parking lot. Terrence's mind spun. He had done everything right. He was polite, cooperative, compliant. He had his ID. He had his work badge. He had a ride. And yet, none of it mattered. The Lyft driver stepped out, phone in hand. "I got the ping 10 minutes ago," he said firmly, gesturing to his screen. "He messaged me. He works here. Why is he in cuffs?" The officer closest to him gave a dismissive wave. "We're sorting it out." But Terrence knew better. This wasn't a misunderstanding being sorted out. This was a conclusion already written, a presumption that had swallowed truth before it could speak. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum in a protest march. People in nearby cars had started to notice. A few passers-by slowed down. Someone across the lot held up a phone, filming from a distance. The camera lens didn't protect Terrence from the shame that filled his chest like cement. After 10 minutes of cold silence, the officers finally huddled near one of the cruisers. The driver had been verified. The call had apparently been unclear. The description, vague. There was no actual reason left to hold him, but no apology followed. One of the officers walked over, keys in hand, and without looking him in the eye, released the cuffs. Terrence flexed his sore wrists, the redness already visible where the metal had pressed his skin. "You're free to go," the officer muttered, as if setting a wild animal loose into the dark. No explanation, no badge numbers offered, just the buzz of radios and the hiss of idling engines. The police turned and left without a word more, as if they hadn't just unraveled a man's sense of security. Terrence stood still for a moment, his breath shallow, his Lyft driver watching him with a mixture of sympathy and anger. He finally climbed into the car, collapsing into the back seat as if he'd just escaped something deadly. The door shut. The driver pulled away in silence. The ride home was just 10 minutes long, but Terrence would carry those 10 minutes of humiliation with him far longer. And in that silence, a new kind of rage began to grow. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that writes, that speaks, that refuses to disappear. Terrence didn't sleep that night. Even after he got home, after the Lyft dropped him off and the door to his small apartment closed behind him, the echo of handcuffs and flashing lights lingered in his mind like a siren he couldn't turn off. His wrists throbbed from the pressure. He ran cold water over them, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his CVS polo still on, creased and wrinkled, a name tag that hadn't protected him from being treated like a suspect instead of a person. He sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, replaying the memory of that night over and over. Then, without overthinking it, he opened his notes app and began to type. He wrote about the bench, about the quiet moment after his shift, about the officers who didn't see a man but a threat. He wrote about the Lyft driver who tried to speak for him, about the way the cuffs felt when they clicked shut, and how the apology never came. And finally, he wrote about how exhausting it was to have to prove your innocence when you hadn't done anything wrong. The words poured out like a dam had broken. He posted it to his social media with a photo of his bruised wrists and the caption, "This is what waiting to go home looks like when you're black." By morning, the post had exploded. Thousands of shares, comments from strangers and friends, messages of support, disbelief, and anger. Local news outlets reached out for interviews. CVS management called to express their concern. Community activists began organizing a public forum. The police issued a brief statement, sterile and vague, claiming they had acted on a call reporting suspicious activity. But the footage from the store's cameras, and the Lyft driver's time-stamped ride record, painted a different story, one that didn't match the official narrative. Terrence wasn't surprised. What surprised him was how quickly people started listening. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was the image of a young man still in uniform, or maybe it was just the undeniable truth of it all, but his story resonated. His voice, once trembling, grew steady as he spoke on local radio, in a town hall, in classrooms. He told his story not just to tell his own, but to give voice to the countless others who had been stopped, searched, humiliated, or harmed for no reason other than existing in the wrong skin at the wrong time. He never asked to be a symbol, but now that he was, he refused to stay silent. Policies began to shift, body cam requirements tightened, new oversight proposals introduced. Change was slow, as it always is, but it was real. And through it all, Terrence kept writing. His dignity, once taken on a quiet night outside a CVS, had become his weapon. And though the memory of those flashing lights never truly faded, neither did his determination to make sure that no one else would be arrested for waiting to go home.